right, so this panel is about horror. Horror. Sorry, I got to be a little bit clear. We're in Vegas. Got to be a little clear. My name is Steve Diamond. I'm a traditionally published author with Baen and Aethon and some other stuff. But what I do is not that important. I'm the moderator today. Okay, so you're not going to hear that much from me. Couple quick ground rules. I'm going to try to leave time for some questions at the end for you guys, so you can ask these three experts up here. If you would do us all a favor and do me a favor, when you actually ask a question. That kind of helps a little bit. And please remember that you're in the audience. You're here to listen to these fine gentlemen. And so please ask questions of them at the time, and less about your own experiences and your own stuff. Okay, it's not. I don't mean to be rude, and I'm not generally a mean guy. But when I'm a moderator, I definitely am rude, and I'm definitely a mean guy. All right. So who, what, when, where. Questiony stuff. Yeah. So that's really about it. Just be respectful of the experts up here, and we'll all be cool. Sound good? All good? All right.
Does that mean we can disrespect the audience?
Yes, you guys can, obviously.
Way ahead of you.
All right. Okay, so to start out with, I'm just going to let you guys introduce yourselves because you can do a better job of it than I can, obviously. Start at the end, Jay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Thorn. I grew up in Monroeville, Pennsylvania.
Yay.
And if you know your horror, you will know that I spent my teenage years at Monroeville Mall trying to follow the tracks of of Romero's films. So started writing horror in about 2014, independently published, and have published some post-apoc and sci-fi stuff as well.
Hi everybody, I'm Lee Mountford from the UK. It's my first time in the States, first time on a panel, so be gentle.
And what do you write?
What's it?
And what do you write?
Oh, sorry, I write horror.
You could pitch a little heavier than that. Just saying, because I intend to pitch her. I'm Jonathan Maberry. I'm a multi-genre traditional author. I write horror, science fiction, fantasy, mystery, thrillers, etc., etc. I write comics for Marvel and IDW. In fact, Black Panther Wakanda Forever is 40% of that's based on my run on the comic, which I'm still freaked out about. I edit Weird Tales magazine. I edit anthologies. In fact, we have two new ones that are here. One that's available at Blackstone, and the other one is going to be launched on Friday. And I also am the president of the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, people who write like a Star Wars novel or something like that. So I run that group.
Awesome. All right, so I hope you guys can see we have some great perspectives up here that I think we can learn from. Now, obviously, I'm going to make a gross assumption here, and that's that a lot of you, most of you, probably all of you, you guys want to either write horror or put horror elements within the fiction that you write. Is that a pretty decent, fair assumption?
Yes.
Sound okay? All right. So what I want to talk about then, to start off with, is what are these most basic elements of horror that you're putting, whether in your straight up horror stuff or in your other fiction. How are you pulling that in? I want to start with you, Jay.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome.
I would immediately go to fear, which I think is an obvious response. But I think a more nuanced word for me would be tension.
Yeah.
I think tension in any form or fashion is sort of a baser element, and whether you're writing thrillers or straight up horror or some other kind of genre fiction, I think that's a key element.
Okay. What about you, Lee?
So I just draw on what scares me, really. I write a lot of the supernatural type horror, things like that, and if I can freak myself out while I'm writing, then I think that's good enough. Right? That's good enough for the audience, yeah. So I tend to draw on that as much as I can.
Yeah, drawing on both of what they said, I always approach horror as it has a level of threat to it. Sometimes supernatural, sometimes not. I mean, Silence of the Lambs won the Bram Stoker Award for Best Horror Novel that year. So it is scary. If you're one of the characters in that story, you're scared. So it's a level of threat that takes you outside your comfort zone and makes you feel helpless, and that kind of defines horror. And I try to put that in my stories. And one of the things that defines my approach to it is a lot of folks say, they ask horror writers a lot, why do you like monsters? Why do you write about monsters? I don't write about monsters. I write about people who fight monsters. And it is a completely different perspective. I don't like monsters. I want my monsters to be scary, and I want them to be the bad guy for the most part. So I write about the people who are faced with something that is a threat that's so big, they can't imagine how they're going to fight it. So the story is them also learning how to level up, maybe through partnership or meeting a Van Helsing or whatever, so that they can confront that threat at whatever cost to them.
So when you guys are doing this, when you're bringing these elements of fear or tension, is the word that we're talking about, what are some of your key tools in your tool belt, for lack of a better term, for building tension? Lee, I want you to start.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Right.
I pick whoever looks like the least comfortable with the question, and I start with you.
To build tension.
Yeah.
That's a difficult one. I don't really have a set answer for that. It depends on the story and what's going on in the manuscript at the time. And just sort of what feels right for the scene and the tropes that's in that specific genre. And just sort of work with that. I don't have a set tool belt, if you like, for bringing in tension in specific areas, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. How about you, Lee? Or Jay?
Yeah, open loops are a great way to create tension.
And explain what you're meaning.
Yeah, so an open loop is presenting a situation to the reader without immediate resolution. So it's something that you can kind of pull through the narrative arc that keeps them turning pages. And I think if you can do that well, and you raise the stakes as you're moving through the story, then I think that's a tool in the tool belt and you can really use that in any genre, not necessarily horror.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, it's a combination of understanding human psychology, because characters matter more than the story points, but also doing research, because research can open up doors to threats of various kinds that you might not be aware of. So if I'm writing, say, a Joe Ledger thriller, which is weird science, I'll talk with epidemiologists, molecular biologists, and so on to find out what's going on, what's so frightening they're working to prevent it or deal with it, and that's going to be something I'll bring in, because if they're working on it now, the general public doesn't know about it yet. So I think I take something that's going to be in the news by the time the book comes out, and then I take characters and decide whose lives would be most negatively impacted, and I try to get into their head. My favorite toolbox tool in my toolbox is shifting points of view within the experience of the unfolding story.
Interesting. Now, and so Jonathan, you've written a lot of books now, and a substantial number of short stories. I think you're in your 150s now.
152.
But who's counting? Does your approach change when you're going from novel to short fiction?
Sure.
How does that happen?
Well, novels, you get so much time to build characters, and you build, you may start, in media res, in action, with things moving, but you have more time to develop the characters and the situations. Short stories, you don't have any of that. You got to start very close to the end of what would, in a novel, be the end of the second act, and jump from there to the conclusion. So you have to be more concise with your ideas. You have to be confident to be able to start a story in motion, and you can't waste a word. That's why I love actually writing to a word count in short fiction, whether it's a piece of flash, a short story, a novelette, whatever. I try to make decisions on how much I can do within that, and part of the process there is it challenges you to manipulate language. Like I read poetry every morning before I write prose, and that actually helps me write my short fiction, because poetry gets to the heart of an idea or concept or whatever much faster than prose does. So I started doing that because of writing short stories, which I didn't want to do at first. I was kind of hesitant about that. And the other thing is I borrowed something Dean Koontz mentioned on the panel we were on, that when he's writing a short story, he writes the first page and then jumps forward and writes the end. And now I do that, and it has cut the time it takes me to write a short story down from 5 days to a day and a half.
Interesting.
And it keeps me from writing all the stuff that really doesn't serve the story that you have in mind.
Huh. What about you guys? So Jay, short fiction type stuff.
Yeah.
What are some of the unique ways in which you approach it?
Yeah, I very, very similar. What Jonathan says is brilliant. I think it was Vonnegut who said, take your short story and start as close to the end as possible.
Yeah, that's
right. And it sounds so easy, but it's extremely difficult. And I've gone through. Maybe this is a little different way to answer your question, Steve. But I've gone through phases. I've gone through phases where I've written 4, 5, 6 novels in a row. Without any sort of writing in between. And then I've gone through a period of time where I might not write a novel for a whole year and I just write short stories. So I think, too, part of it is, for me, kind of not following the muse, that sounds too heady, but just sort of recognizing what phase I'm in or what I'm interested in at the moment and kind of feeding that energy, you know. And so in those circumstances, I'm excited to come to the page. Because the payoff with a short story is great, right? Like, whether it's 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or even a month, like, you know you're gonna cross that finish line very quickly, and there's a lot of satisfaction in that.
Yeah. What about you, Lee? Like, do you? I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this to you here. Whatever. So when you're, whatever, right? When you're writing the horror stuff, what are when you're approaching the short stuff versus the long, do you see an added benefit when you're keeping it to a shorter, more concise story?
One thing, I don't write as many shorts as I do novels, but one thing I do when I'm writing short stories, and it's something I've just fell into, is switch to the first person. And I find that's because it's a more immediate, and it goes back to what you're saying about starting at a later point and getting ready in the story. I think if it's first person, that helps me dive into the story a lot quicker, whereas with a novel, my go-to is always third person. I struggle with a first person perspective on a novel, but with a short story, I just think that helps me get straight into the zone a lot quicker and push through to the end a lot faster as well.
So when you switch over to novels, then you say you write primarily in third person then for your novels.
Yeah.
So for you then, what is it about that aspect, using the third person point of view, that really gets you, that really helps you sell your third person narrative within horror?
I think it helps me build a story because it feels, whether it comes across this way I don't know, but it feels a bit of a slower pace, and you can build a story and build the world just a little bit more, whereas first person is much more immediate, I find, so that helps me in a short form. And the third person just helps me build things at a slower pace and need more into the story.
Interesting. What about you, Jonathan? I mean, I've read enough of your stuff. I know that you bounce all over the place. Do you have a preferred tense when you're writing horror?
It depends on the story.
Just matters,
I mean, I prefer ensemble cast with shifting points of view. That's my go-to for novels, except for my Joe Ledger thrillers, which switch between first and third person. Every scene Joe is in, it's first person. Every scene he's not in is third person. It works really well because there are things a person like him would not know about what's going on. But with short fiction, well, actually, just with point of view, I try it sometimes a couple of different ways on the first page to see what feels right. And like some short fiction, I do like the first person because I don't want the character to know more than, I don't want the reader to know more than the character knows. I want it to be in the moment, it's experiential. Whereas, some stories you do want the character to be as blindsided as the reader, so third person works well for it. So it's all comes down to the story. Like, and when I'm writing for kids, I definitely write in third person. But very deep point of view. So I'm able to give the extra information about the world because some of it a kid would not know, but at the same time I'm able to get inside the kid's experience, going through those incidents.
Interesting. Okay. Jay, I'm assuming that you experiment all over the board and you just kind of, whatever feels right for the moment. Do you find that you start tackling different tones in very different ways depending on like how deep into the horror you want to get or how pulled back you want to be?
I think, and I don't know. This is just my experience. I don't know much more than any of you do as far as how the creative process works. But I've found a lot of times I find tone by doing some research.
Okay.
And I know my friend Joe will appreciate this. there's so much horror in the ancient world that all you can do is read a little bit about it. Like I did a whole trilogy on the Gaki, which is the hungry ghost myth from Japanese folklore, and so if you do a little bit of research and you get a sense of what some of those very well told ancient or old stories are, it starts to give you the tone that you want for the story.
Interesting. Okay. So I want to pull back a little bit. I think there's this, and maybe this is just me being me on my soapbox, whatever. But I often find that when I'm trying to sell people on horror, that they're like, oh, no, I don't do horror. Either A, it's just all slasher and violent, or B, no, I can't do victim fiction. And I often find, to me, that seems like it's a misconception to me, especially that latter part, that it's a victim fiction. How, within horror, do you guys make your protagonists active within the story versus just the consummate victim as they're being dragged through a story?
Stakes have to matter to them. I did a horror story recently, ecological horror, about a boat that was by that big trash, like the thing that's the size of Texas out in the Pacific. And the people on the boat are going to be threatened by this monster that rises out of it. It's their experience. So my whole approach to that is I want the story to be about the experience, not about the event. A lot of writers make the mistake, they get so hooked on the event or the plot point that they build a story around that, and that's too meta, it's too big. You know, the person in the story, if you watch like movies like The Lord of the Rings is a good example, The Return of the King, the big battle, you have the big armies, big, but it keeps drilling down to individual characters and their crisis moments within that. Victory moments and crisis moments. It's not focusing down to see them get killed, it's not victim oriented. It's what is their arc in the moment of that battle. So with horror, what is the arc, the character's arc in the moment of that? Sometimes they are going to die. But the story, unless you're writing a very skewed or limited piece, the story isn't about them dying. It's about them trying not to die, trying to deal with the situation. So it's not victim fiction. It's experience, and I use the word experiential, it's their experience within it. We hope they win, but if they lose, we kind of understand because the stakes are that big.
Yeah.
I think with horror, it's not that much different to other genres in that respect. It's the story starts and things happen to them, and then the protagonist will fight back and try to overcome that. And I don't think it has to be different to other genres in that regard. And I suppose that's what the final girl trope is. You know, it starts out, things happen to them, and then they fight through and come through. So I don't think horror has to be that different, and that could be a way to sell it to people that you underselling horror because that's not what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, these guys said it wonderfully. I just think, your characters have to have agency. Like they have to be able to make decisions that impact their trajectory of whatever journey that they're on.
So I want to go back way early now. So, Jay, why, and I want you guys each to think about your answer to this too as Jay's talking, because I'm going to pick on him first. You're welcome. Why horror? Why did you start writing horror to begin with? What drew you to it?
That's an easy answer. Pet Sematary. I found that book at a moment in my life. I might have been 13, 14, something around there. I was not a reader. Reading was something the teachers assigned. It was not something I would ever do until I started reading that book. And it's been out a while. I still won't spoil, but I could never look at cats the same way again.
Well, they are evil.
They are. So are the little children, by the way. But yeah, that was it. Like that, and I don't even know if I understood what it was at the time, but I understood how it made me feel. And I can distinctly remember reading that book, laying underneath my parents' dining room table, and I was only in the dining room because my mom was in the kitchen. I was scared to take that book into a room where there was no one else around, so I remember reading in the dining room while she was in the kitchen.
What about you, Lee?
I think I've always been drawn to it. When I was younger, it was how I always loved telling ghost stories, that type of thing. And if I was getting a book out of the library at school, it was a horror story, point horror and that kind of thing. And I remember in '92 there was a program in the UK called Ghostwatch. I don't know if that's travelled too far over here. Yeah.
BBC America.
Yeah. Okay. Stephen Walker wrote it. That scared the hell out of me. I didn't finish it. I only finished that program in about 15 years later when it came out on DVD. That's when I knew what the ending was. Before that, I had no clue. It scared the shit out of me. And I was at my grandmother's that night, and she saw me watching it, and she said, "Can you just go in the kitchen and switch on the light?" No. But that stuck with me, and that's all I could talk about for the next few days was that program, and it's just stuck since then. So I think there's something built in that just is drawn to that genre.
For me, I blame 3 people.
Okay.
My grandmother, who was a spooky old lady who believed in everything. If you can imagine Luna Lovegood as a 90-year-old woman, that's her. She believed in everything. And she taught me all about the folklore when I was a kid, so I loved all the creepy monsters in folklore. In fact, writing a book on supernatural folklore is what got me interested in writing fiction.
Oh, okay.
The other 2 people, longer story than I'm going to tell here, but the short version of it is I got to know and be mentored by Ray Bradbury and Richard Matheson for 3 years when I was 12, 13, and 14. It's a cool story, best told over drinks. But the second time I met them, they each brought books for me to read. And they said they were going to do that. It turns out they wound up being in the same book. They both gave me copies of The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Which, that first paragraph is the best education anyone could ever have for writing suspense. If you read that first paragraph, you'll understand it.
Yeah.
And they said this is what horror really is. This is because it's all in the mind. I read that book every year on Halloween week, and I still flip-flop every year. One year I'll think it's a ghost story. Next year I'll think it's simply a story about a psychological disintegration told by an unreliable narrator. And I'm right both times. And that's the beauty of the book. It draws you in, and from then on, I was a horror guy, from that point on.
Nice. Let's talk about fear for a second. We brought that up.
That's a scary topic.
I know, it's terrible.
Dad joke, what can I say?
Is there, how do you help your readers feel the same kind of fear that your characters are feeling? Is it possible? I know it is possible. Obviously, it's possible. How do you get that? How do you try to convey that same fear and emotion?
Well, it's empathy. I mean, writers should have empathy for, in general, because if we're going to write realistic characters, we have to be able to step into the skin of other people. So empathy really matters. And when you're creating a character, you become that character. If I'm writing a story about I just wrote a story about a little kid who everyone in his family is turning into monsters. He doesn't actually see them. He's hiding in the bathroom. But he hears things on the other side of the door. All of that is from the kid's point of view. And I'm able to go back and touch on things that have made him afraid before. And also I think of what would be the worst thing for a kid if his parents became monsters. The people he trusts to look out for him. So just taking that as the note, I was able to write a story that I felt really bad for the character because the character was genuinely afraid and losing the only people who could help him. So by getting into that, by feeling the empathy for that child, I think I was able to write a story that readers will really relate to. I felt for the child, and I tried to put those feelings filtered through his point of view onto the page, and I know a lot of writers do the same thing. We all have the same approach. It's all about the character's experience, and empathy matters. Empathy is a great tool for a writer.
What Jonathan said.
Yeah, you're just gonna say ditto. You can't. You have to come up with a different answer.
No, we're not having that. Come on.
But to build on that, I like to feel it myself. So it does build on the empathy point. That if I'm writing it, I want to be either scared or emotional or whatever it may be. I want to be feeling that myself. So that builds on that. So if I want to be scared, I want to make sure that I'm writing. I create myself out. And a good way to do that for me is to get up early when it's dark and everybody else is in bed, and I'm writing on my own, and just to sort of build the tension for myself. I think the words come a little bit easier then, get myself on edge, and that's something that helps. Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
I've just been taking notes. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's all I'm doing. It's like,
I honestly struggle with that. I always have. I think I tend to, in many aspects of my life, I'm too much in my head, and I think a lot of horror is about what's in your gut, not necessarily what's in your head. So Yeah, I don't have a really good answer for that. I think that's one of the areas of my own writing that I just continually work on.
Can I just throw something?
Absolutely.
I had a conversation with I hate to be name dropping, but I was talking to Neil Gaiman the other day.
Who? No, I'm just
We were talking about a similar topic, and his approach when he doesn't know how to get inside the head of the character, he just goes into their five senses. You know, what does it smell? What's the temperature? Something that they're having a physical reaction to. He says if he does that, the chapter writes itself. And I'm like, I was taking notes on that one.
yes, sir.
If Neil says it, I'm gonna, you know.
Thanks for sharing that.
No, that's fantastic.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that, though? So is he literally...
Sorry.
What else? Yeah. Is he literally taking those 5 cents?
Not all of them.
And then...
He looks at the scene and sees which sense would be the one that would send information that would disturb you. So if you have as a character in a warm room, but he's cold, sitting in the chair he's sitting in, he's starting to have a reaction. Why is everyone else sweating and I'm cold? That was the example he used for me. He said, then it starts being very personal to the character. And they have to sort out that weird reaction to that weird circumstance that their senses are telling them. Their senses, because they're ours, if they start sending us something negative, it feels like a betrayal. And again, I'm quoting Neil. So that's how he does it. And I thought that was a brilliant approach to it. You know, get inside the five senses and find which one is the best vehicle to drive through the scene.
No, that's nice because it also lends a sense of authenticity to the character and their reactions, right? That's really nice. Okay, look, we got about 15 minutes left. And so rather than have me gab on about things you don't care about, this is a great opportunity for you to ask directly of these fine gentlemen up here any questions you have.
I resent the word gentleman, by the way.
Gentlemen.
I did have a question.
I thought
Lee,
you
for
might.
Lee, no, I'm not kidding. But Lee did actually bring up the and I wrote it down, talks about what freaks him out. So what freaks you guys out?
So yeah, I don't know if you guys heard in the back, the question is, what is it that freaks out our horror authors up here?
I'm a parent of 2 children, so anything that hits that nerve immediately freaks me out. And it will often find its way into one of my stories.
For me, it's things that I know that are beyond my capabilities. Like, I'm not afraid of a slasher with a knife. I'm 59 years in jiu-jitsu, former bodyguard. I've dealt with knives. You know, it doesn't scare me. It's unpleasant, but it doesn't scare me. So I don't write about that. I write about science and technology being misused because that is frightening. I've done research. I've been to the CDC and I saw how sloppy some of their safeguards are. I could have walked off with a vial of Marburg virus and they would not have known. It was just there on a table when they're walking me through it, and that scares me. I have somebody who's a trainer for drone pilots, and they're sitting in bases here in the United States using drones all over the world. They're kids, and that's terrifying. They don't have the emotional maturity to do what they're doing, and when they do it successfully, it's going to damage them irrevocably. So that kind of stuff scares the hell out of me. And harm coming to my family, is a big one. So I definitely write about harm coming to the people that the protagonist cares about, but that person may not be there to do anything about it. So those are the things that scare me. Good question.
Yeah, the family thing was a big one for me as well. I've got two young girls, and I wrote a story that dealt with loss of a child, and that was tough. It was tough to write. But also the supernatural, and my own belief is I don't know. I don't say I do believe, think I don't, but it still gets to me. It's always freaked me out. I think it always will. And it may be because I don't know. I'm happy to say that. But if it's something outside of my control, I don't know what's coming. That really gets under my skin. Yeah. Because at night, if I hear a noise in the house, first thought it's a demon. It won't be.
It probably is, but
How do you know it's not, though?
Exactly. It hasn't been so far. Yeah.
Could be the cat.
Cats are cute demons.
I thought I saw a hand in the back. Yeah.
Do any of you actively try to write to market, or do you write whatever you want to write? And follow-up question would be, what is the horror market right now? What are people interested in right now?
I can definitely talk about that. I used to be on the board of the Horror Writers Association, and I'm very active. In fact, I'm guest of honor at the next StokerCon. So I'm very much involved in the horror community. What was the first part of the question?
Do you actively try
To write to market. Yes and no. Like I know there are certain genres that are hot. It depends on where you are in your career. If you can get a book out really quickly, you can sometimes write to market or even write to trend. If you can't, if you're writing first book, you really shouldn't. You should just write the book that scares the hell out of you and try to sell it. But writing the market is tough. Like I write in various genres. Like I just finished the first cosmic horror deep space science fiction. That is a market. Science fiction, horror science fiction is a market, Event Horizon and so on. That's a known market.
You wrote Horror Winnie the Pooh.
I did write horror Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
I literally did write a Winnie the Pooh Cthulhu short story for an anthology.
Yeah, we're in that same collection.
Yeah, I know. The editor, Joe Monson, is my new hero.
Yeah.
So especially when you're writing under assignment, sometimes you have to. Like I'm doing a short story for Blizzard Entertainment based on one of their video games. I have to write to market. So you have to be capable of doing it. But when you have an idea that's just an idea and it may fit into a genre, but you just want to explore it and let it be its own unique thing, write the hell out of that and then go find the market that it belongs to. Richard Matheson never once wrote a story with the intention of selling it, because he would write a mystery, he would write a horror, he would write a ghost story, he would write a science fiction. He would just write his favorite book and then give it to his agent to sell. And he was never on the bestseller list while he was alive. It's crazy. What do you guys think?
So it is a little both. As long as I love the subgenre, and I think that the haunted house subgenre does sell very well, and that's something I really do enjoy. I write other things knowing going in they aren't going to sell as well. I've got a dark fantasy horror hybrid series that doesn't do as well. I knew going in it wouldn't, but it's something that I wanted to write. So it's trying to get that balance, and I think if you can build up enough of an audience, you can have that freedom to go both ways. But as long as you love the market that you're going to write for, otherwise it's going to come out as trite, I would say.
I don't have a lot to add to that question, but I will say that I was it was in Pittsburgh. I was at StokerCon this year, and there was a lot of conversation around what is the horror genre. And I think you almost have to think about defining that before you can write to that market, and that's a really interesting conversation. And there was a lot of optimism about it within the HWA about that sort of broadening of the genre and having more acceptance of horror as a genre compared to the past.
And actually, to that point, because the horror genre is so difficult to clearly define, it kind of invites experimentation.
Yeah.
It definitely invites cross-genre stuff. A lot of, and sometimes a book that may not sell when you first do it. We've all had some of those that didn't hit expectations. At the same time, it kind of plants a seed out there, and that may wind up coming back to help broaden that genre in the long run.
Yeah.
What are favorite tropes that each of you always like to hit in your novels?
I've hit a few. I don't know if I have a favourite. I have a series based on haunted houses. That's a big trope, but by virtue of that being a series, that was hit quite a bit. Cannibals in the woods, pretty basic trope. But I like taking a trope and putting a spin on it, where the cannibals had a sort of a cosmic horror entity behind them and things like that. So, yeah, things like that. Yeah.
The Dark Loner is one of my favorites.
Psychologically fractured characters. I know, psychologically speaking, I'm a bag of hamsters, so I want my characters to reflect that.
That doesn't sound that bad, Jonathan.
You haven't seen me after 2 martinis. I'm a different guy. But no, I like characters who come with damage. I call them children of the Stormlands. There's a long story behind that too. But people who have been damaged are the ones I relate to most. People with scars of one kind or another. I don't relate as well to people with no scars. So I tend to build characters who their personality and whatever it is that eventually make them win is because of that damage. A character who has seen so much horror, my sisters and I were abused by a criminal father. He was a horrible guy. So, we, each of us took that and ran with it in different directions, but the directions were away from him. That's the kind of thing that you can use to build really credible stuff.
I have one more that I just thought of that I'll throw in. I like to make a lot of the characters atheists if it's a fantastical story because it challenges the worldview. And if you're in a haunted house and you are, no, I'm an atheist, that is not a ghost, they're going to stick around longer.
That's good.
I like that. That's
Atheist is going to be the new subgenre for horror.
I want to copyright that.
Yeah, about quarter. Yeah.
Do you ever write for an audiobook for an audience, and what are the attributes of a good audio narration?
I write because my fourth book was my first audiobook. I love audio, really love audio. I listen to audio myself more than I read actual physical books. So and because I have over 100 audiobooks out, I like the way in which the books are interpreted by the reader, but I also know that the readers are mostly actors. So I want to be able to break up the story in even the way it lays on the page, so they know where the dramatic beats are, the pauses, just like in music. If you know where the pauses, the rests are, that's what builds your performance, individual from anyone else who plays the same piece of music. I want to be able to write to the readers. Ray Porter's my audiobook reader. We've done 54 books now together. And I love the guy. He's fantastic. And he's an actor. He's been in everything. And I write to his narration style. If I'm going to write something that I know, like maybe Hillary Huber or Emma Galvin or someone's going to write, I'll listen to their stuff before I write the book. I know, in print, it won't matter as much. But I know that everything I do will go to audio, and audio is now 30% of my income. So I definitely write to the audio market, and I want it to be read. I want to write something that is, in a way, a performance piece.
I don't deliberately write to audio, but all of my books have been translated into audio. So my writing tends to be short and punchy and snappy, which I think helps. But it wasn't a deliberate thing that I set out to do now.
Yeah, I haven't either, although I hired a coach to help me with dialogue a few years ago. That was a weakness I knew I had, and I think, although that's not the same as writing to audio, I think if you have great dialogue, that's going to come across well in audio.
For sure.
I've been told by audiobook readers that the dialogue helps the reader embody the character enough so that they are more comfortable reading the rest of it. And I've heard that from in different ways from three different audiobook readers, so you're on the right track. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, very back.
In terms of covers, what do you look for in your covers, and what do you find sells for horror covers?
Well, you guys look at me.
Everyone looks at each other like, no, you.
I'm the indie, so I'm in charge of all the covers. I'm a terrible judge of covers. What I think is nice is not what sells. So what I try and do is I give my cover designer comps, and I say, this is the vibe I'm going for. I might give them 3 to 5 covers and let them do their job. Like the graphic designer, if I have faith in them, if I know they're a professional and they're an expert, then I'm going to trust their judgment. And I might ask them to tweak something here or there or change a typeface or something, but for the most part, I'm hiring them as the expert, and I'm not going to tell them how to do their job. And there have been instances where I got the cover back and I was like, ew. And I started showing it to my friends, other horror writers, and they're like, that's awesome. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, would you? All right.
Yeah, 100%. I work closely with the cover designer in India as well.
Yeah.
And you get your options back, but what I tend to do now is I'll put it to the readers in the private Facebook group and things like that. And a lot of the times it comes back and it's not the cover I would have chosen. And the other thing is that I run it past my wife because, yeah, she does know. I would never admit that, but she does.
But you just did now.
I think it's on film too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no take backs. Sorry, but
With traditional, you get very little say over your covers early on. As your career goes forward, you do. But usually, like with most of my publishers, they'll give me 3 comp, and I pick which one I like. Or a couple, and I'm an artist. A couple times and I say artist, I didn't put the word professional in front of it for a reason. Early on, I would send a couple of mock-ups of covers, and they're like, "That's adorable." No. So I stopped doing that. The only time I have direct influence over the covers is if I'm doing a small press anthology. Then I'm the one that usually hires an artist, and I almost always hire the artists who are doing my big 5 books because I know their work, I know their work ethic, and also know how they can they're more skilled at taking the concept of the book and finding an illustration that works. And writing in comics actually helped me with that too, because I've learned to trust the artist because that's what their A game is. Mine is words, you know.
Let's see. Yeah, the brown shirt. Yeah, you. Yeah, yes. You.
Thank you.
Oh, not. Hold on. One sec. It was behind you. Sorry, brown shirt. We'll do you next. You're good.
Quickly, it seems like some of the really great stories, like The Shining or Rosemary's Baby, you kind of know something's happening, but you also kind of don't know. So when the reveal happens, it's a huge shock. You actually feel it. It seems like a lot of what I'm writing is just sort of this happens, and now here's a monster. So I'm wondering if you have any advice. Is that pacing? Is that plot? I mean, how much pre-work do you have to do? I guess is the question I'm asking. So that the reveal follows naturally, but it also is still a surprise.
Lee, you said you wanted to answer that. Good.
Yeah.
Finished now? Time to wrap up?
No, you got plenty of time for you.
I plot quite heavily, so I outline, and I tend to build in the reveals and scares in that. And so a lot of the times I like quite a slow burn, so small things at first, just dropping in. Depending on the story, if it's a much more fast-paced, aggressive story, that's different. But I do outline quite heavily, which helps me with the pace, and hopefully. I did okay with that.
Sounds good.
I also plot. I'm definitely a plotter. But while I'm writing, stories can become organic, so that can change how the reveal happens. But a lot of it boils down to trying to get inside the head of the reader. I switched to my reader persona, and if I think I, as the reader, could have figured out something before I want them to, that gives me a reason to go back and make some substantial changes, because I want them to follow me to a certain point, but then I want to find a couple of surprises that are going to really twist things in a different direction. And a lot of it is thinking like a reader to influence the writer in me.
I don't have too much to add to that. I would just say if you have very clear wants and needs for your protagonist, that will help with that. So maybe just getting more intentional with that beforehand.
All right. Where am I at? Oh, we've got 58 seconds left. So probably no more time for questions, unfortunately. You can harass them in the hallway and stuff. Honest, I'm sure they're totally willing for it. I'm just volunteered you guys.
Actually, I am willing, and you can have my cards, you can email me if you have a question about the horror field.
Yeah.
But also on my website, jonathanmaberry.com, there is a whole page called Free Stuff for Writers, and it has tons of free downloadable PDFs. Grab it, share it with your writer friends.
Yep. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Wish we had that. Thank you.